Oh, hello. Welcome. I am Catfish Franklin, and this here is Catfish Corner. And today's story is called Old News featuring Stacko Lee, Episode 3, The Early Crimes. The Early Crimes. But before I get to that, I would just like to thank you for stopping by here on YouTube. And I would also like to thank my patrons, who I guess are now known as members, over there on Patreon. Thank you very much also. Alright, let's get into today's story, The Early Crimes. First off, I just real quick want to say that in episode 2, I did some censoring, if you will, of some racist words, and I found it to be distracting and somewhat of a charade, honestly. So I'm not going to do that. Today I'm just going to read this as it is, these clippings. And, here at the channel, we are all about love, and music is a thing that can really bring people together. But I think in the spirit of putting on our detective caps and reading newspapers from over 100 years ago, it's worth wading through a bit of scum to find some gems of news stories, if you will. However, if that is the sort of thing that would really bum you out, then you know what you have to do, and no worries. Hopefully I'll catch you down the road in one of my song videos. But for those of you who are cool with it, let us proceed. So what we are doing is building a house here from the bottom up. We started off, we've determined that the man's name was Stack Lee, or Lee Shelton was his real name, known as Stack Lee, and we examined the newspaper articles detailing the actual murder of William Lyons, which really was an argument about politics that turned into messing about with each other's hats, and then murder. So, in today's episode 3, The Early Crimes, we're going to be doing just that. We're going to be looking at what was Stack Lee up to before the murder of William Lyons. Was he really a violent man all the time? Or was he perhaps just having a bad day that day, and he was really a good character? Or perhaps something in between. So, let's see, let's start off. So the very first thing that we find in the newspapers, that I found anyways, is from 1887, November 22nd, 1887, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, as follows. R.C. Jones, 1723 Lucas Avenue, was knocked out by Lee Sheldon at a colored ball in Central Turner Hall. Jones was taken home seriously hurt about the head, and Sheldon was locked up. Okay, that's our first clipping. So basically, Lee Sheldon beat a guy about the head. So next one, September 15th, 1888. So a little bit less than a year later, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. This one, I'm not going to go through and read the whole thing right now. This one is so bizarre. This is going to be its own episode coming up. But the gist of this one is, the second clipping, is that Lee Sheldon and two women were having an argument on the sidewalk. And it sounds like, I believe, it was mostly the two women were having the argument. And they were all arrested for disorderly conduct or disturbing the peace or something. And in the end, Lee Sheldon was fined $5, while the two women were fined $10 each. So he got off a little easier than them for whatever reason. All right, the next clipping, May 17th, 1889. New warrants. Oh, St. Louis Globe Democrat. New warrants. Stack Lee Shelton charged with assault to kill Frank M. Hale. Okay, that's interesting, because that, as far as I found, is the first time they say Stack Lee Shelton. All three names together, no quotes or anything, just Stack Lee Shelton. And charged with assault to kill Frank M. Hale. Okay, less than a month later, June 12th, 1889, St. Louis Globe Democrat. This is likely involving the same thing as this last article we just read. Court of Correction. Lee Shelton, alias Stack Lee, assault to kill, charged with cutting Frank M. Hall on the night of May 6th. Defendant discharged. So Lee Shelton was discharged for that crime. And then later on down the page, I just found this by accident. Charles Mann and Henry Shaw, assault to kill, charged with dangerously cutting Frank M. Hall on May 6th. Defendants held in $500 bond. So those guys didn't get away with it, even though all three of them were originally charged with cutting as Frank M. Hale or Hall. So that's interesting. And also note there is the one guy's name was Charles Mann, one of the guys who had the $500 bond. Okay, August 23rd, 1890, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. So that's a little over a year later. New warrants. New criminal warrants issued at the four courts yesterday charge Lee Sheldon with assault with intent to kill George Wells. Another intent to kill, assault with intent to kill. Okay, September 23rd, 1890. 1 month later, St. Louis Globe Democrat. Court of Criminal Correction. Dismissals were entered in the following cases. Lee Shelton, charged with assault to kill Dan O'Leary. Okay, another assault to kill for another guy, Dan O'Leary, but he was dismissed. Okay, 4 days later, September 27th, 1890, St. Louis Globe Democrat. Lee Shelton, Charles Mann again, and William Nero, all colored, were tried and acquitted on a charge of attempting to burglarize the store of H. Jacobus, number 713 Lucas Avenue. Okay, that's an interesting one. Robbery. Charles Mann shows up again. All right. February 6th, 1892, Globe Democrat. Held for highway robbery. Lee Shelton, alias Stack Lee, a notorious Negro of the 3rd Ward, is in limbo, charged with highway robbery. He was arrested yesterday morning on complaint of Mrs. Emma Benton, a negress, with whom he had been living at 1535 Lucas Avenue. She stated to the police that she met Shelton on 11th Street and Lucas Avenue last Thursday night, and that he accosted her, and while conversing, she claims, Shelton held her up and took $5 from her. A warrant has been issued charging him with robbery in the 1st degree. So that is interesting. Here on the 18th of February, that same year, here's another story about that same incident. A little more information here. For robbing an old woman, St. Louis Globe Democrat. For robbing an old woman, Archie Dorsey was arrested by officers Burke and Tracy yesterday afternoon and landed in jail at the 3rd District with a charge of highway robbery placed against him. A few weeks ago, Dorsey, it is alleged, in company with Lee Shelton, a Negro, robbed an old colored woman of $5. The woman had the money, which was in one bill, in her hand when the two men approached and one of them snatched the bill. They both escaped, but Shelton was afterward arrested. The woman refused to prosecute, and he was released, but a warrant was sworn out for Dorsey's arrest. A close watch was kept for the fugitive, and yesterday he was caught. He has a bad reputation and has been implicated in several daring jobs in this city and elsewhere. Okay, that's interesting. So basically what we have in this story is Lee Shelton literally saw his landlord, likely a boarding house of some nature, saw his landlord walking down the street and held her up and stole her money while he was living there. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. So that's that one. 1892. Okay, so we're approaching 1895 when the murder happened. So here's a good one. September 10th, 1894, St. Louis Globe Democrat. An opium joint raided. Sergeant McKenna and Officers Stanley and Liebig raided an opium joint on the second floor of 1305 Linden Street yesterday morning and arrested Lee Shelton, Henry Howard, Henry Sneed, and Thomas Valley, all colored. The place was conducted by Thomas Valley. When the police broke in, they found all of the persons named lying in a stupor on the floor. Two Negroes who happened to be awake jumped through a window, carrying the sash with them, and made their escape. So, that's a good one. Stack Lee hanging out in the opium den. November 13th, 1894, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Fractured his skull. Lee Shelton beats up Henry Clay with a revolver. Lee Shelton and Henry Clay, two Negroes, got into a dispute at 1:30 a.m. in Nat Shelton's saloon, 714 North High Street, and in the fight which ensued, Lee Shelton assaulted Clay on the head with a revolver, inflicting a number of scalp wounds. Clay was taken to the city dispensary, where it was ascertained that in addition to the other injuries, he had sustained a fracture of the skull. He refused to go to the city hospital and was taken to his home, 1007 North 12th Street. Lee Shelton was arrested by officers Hunt and Hogeman of the 3rd District on the charge of assault to kill. So that's interesting. Another assault to kill, and again, Lee Shelton beating someone on the head, and this time specifically pistol whipping them with the butt of his gun, I believe. With his gun. It doesn't say the butt. But, so, let's see. This, I believe, the next day, St. Louis Globe-Democrat, same story, but some more information. Beaten with a revolver. Lee Shelton and Henry Clay Colored had a fight over a game of craps in Nat Shelton Saloon, 1714 North High Street, yesterday morning at 1:30 o'clock. Shelton beat Clay on the head with a revolver, inflicting 5 severe scalp wounds and fracturing his skull. The injured man was taken in a patrol wagon to the dispensary, where Dr. Fitzpatrick dressed his wounds and pronounced them to be very serious, after which he was removed to his home, 1007 North 12th Street. Officers Hunt and Hageman arrested Shelton and placed him in the 3rd District Station, where he will be held pending the results of Clay's injuries. Okay, so, pistol whipped the guy, fractured his skull. He is literally going around town busting heads. Okay, January 1st, 1895. This is an interesting one. This is one where it's somehow, this seems to happen. Stack Lee is just like kind of in this story, even though he's not a part of it. So, and also the thing with this one, as I was researching it, part of the newspaper clipping was like ripped off and stuff, so it's not entire. So I'm just going to read a part of it here, just to kind of give you an idea what's going on. And Stack Lee is just like, oh yeah, he's also here, but this is interesting. Okay, deadly duel. Frank Casey and John Kelly exchanged shots in a saloon. Kelly, mortally wounded, and Casey shot in the shoulder. The men quarreled over Emma B., a woman of ill repute. Casey's account. Casey was found in his cell on the ground floor. He pretended to be asleep for a few minutes, but finally became talkative and described the duel graphically, showing as well as he could the position they were in when Kelly received what may prove to be mortal wounds. At first he said that the shooting was a piece of skylarking, but he afterwards admitted that it was about a woman. Casey is a fairly intelligent mulatto. Yes, mister, there was a woman in the case, said he. It was about Emma B. She is a sort of sporting woman that lives near where I do, 712 North 12th Street. Lee Shelton, John Kelly, and I were at Emma B.'s house an hour before the shooting occurred. Emma was not there. Kelly was feeling frisky, and to frighten the girls, he shot off his pistol. We stayed about an hour and went back to the saloon at 1201 Gay Street. Emma went back home and heard about Kelly shooting off his pistol in her house. She was mad. She came running back to the saloon and began chewing the rag with Kelly about the matter. Kelly sassed her back. They had it up and down, each one cursing at the other for 10 or 15 minutes. When she was gone, I and Lee Shelton got to asking Kelly what he shot off his pistol in the house for. He was half drunk, and so was I. Kelly got mad, but I did not believe he meant any harm. Life and death struggle. I was off at one corner of the bar talking to Lee Shelton when he came behind me and caught my right hand. I looked around and saw that he was drawing his pistol. Then I got scared. We tussled for 2 or 3 minutes, but I couldn't get my hand loose. I tried to keep him from getting out his gun, but was no good with my left hand. He finally put the pistol to my back and fired, still holding my right hand with his right. In the row, we raced up and down the whole saloon. Everybody else cleared out of the way. I broke loose as soon as Kelly shot me. He then got scared and jumped over the bar. As he did so, I fired at him twice. Then somebody came and took my gun, and the police arrested us. So that's bizarre. Lee Shelton is just sitting there when basically a duel erupts between two fellers that he had been hanging out with at what likely sounds like a whorehouse, being with the girls around that Kelly wanted to frighten. But so that's a piece of that article. That is interesting, but kind of a tangent. So on we go. Let's see. This is the last one before the murder of William Lyons. January 21st, 1895, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Fighting Negroes arrested. In a fight about 2:30 a.m. in front of Nat Shelton's saloon, 716 North High Street, Lee Shelton, alias Stack Lee, colored, fired a shot without effect at Thomas Gibson, also colored. Then he struck Gibson on the head with the gun handle, inflicting a scalp wound. Shelton and Gibson, and Frank Turner, and Charles Gordon, also colored, were arrested. Okay, in that one, yet another guy where Stack Lee pistol whips him, this time specifically with the butt of his gun. So that is the collection of reports, newspaper reports, that I've found about this strange case. So I feel that this really gives us an interesting look at this guy. I mean, he is only in the newspaper for being involved in crimes or somehow crime adjacent. And another interesting thing is that it seems like he often gets off or gets a lesser sentence than other people, perhaps, that are also involved, which is interesting. I don't know what that means. It could just be coincidence. It is over a period of 8 years. But, I mean, what we have here is a guy who goes around beating people up, robbing people, breaking and entering and robbing residences, pistol whipping people, and giving them skull fractures, and cutting people. He was specifically charged in one thing with cutting a guy. So that's what this guy is doing. 1887, that's only 5 years after Jesse James was assassinated, which I like to consider kind of like a pivotal point in time. I use that as a sort of a point of reference, if you will, with other things that happened around this time. And when he first shows up, it's 1887, Stack Lee. So that is interesting, and he is violent. He is going around beating people up. It's wild. It is wild. But one thing that I did not see through any of this was any reference to him being a pimp or anything about him dressing fancy. I don't think I came across anything that mentioned his clothes in any way other than the hat, with during the murder of William Lyons in that story. So I think we're starting to get to see we've got a pretty good idea, I think, who this guy was. Not to say he was pure evil, but this dude was a bad dude walking around in St. Louis at the end of the 19th century. So it's all very interesting. That's pretty much it for the early crimes. That's all that I have found so far. It's possible there is more out there, but that is a good amount of reports. I think that gives us a good idea, and it covers a good amount of time. So with that, we will put an end to episode 3. I will be seeing you next time in episode 4, which is going to be a really weird one. Episode 4, what I'm going to be dealing with in that episode was just a complete surprise to me. I did not see it coming, so I hope you'll stick around for that. And thank you for those of you who have stuck around this long. If you like this sort of thing, this particular series of episodes is taking a lot of work. So if you want to help me out with this thing here, you could like or subscribe, hit the bell, and also consider checking out my Patreon page. That is a really, really good way to help me out. So thank you very much for stopping by. That's it for story time, and I'll see you next time.